Welcome to the Rant Live. Welcome, everyone, to the Rant Live. It's Thursday, November 11th, 2021, and we find ourselves in the midst of the GM winter meetings are going on. Actually, they end today, I believe, right?
I don't even know. Yeah,
doesn't
probably.
matter.
Like, there's nothing. Yeah, it's so inconsequential. Like, the only thing it's good for is, I think it's great for the reporters, especially if they're in the Midwest, or maybe the East Coast, to be able to go out to San Diego for a few days and just get into scrums and get sound bites from the executives. But nothing ever happens at these. Like, even the winter meetings, the GM meetings have always been pretty quiet. The winter meetings used to be like the event, right? Which they probably won't even happen this year because it's going to fall after the CBA. No Rule 5 draft, none of that. But this is like setup stuff. I think this is more an excuse for these guys to all get into a luxury resort and kind of schmooze together for a few days. So.
Yeah, they're working. That's what they tell their wives.
Yeah,
honey, I have to go work in San Diego, and it's like, but what? It doesn't ever come across as like it's a boondoggle. It's like it's very hard to tell what happens. I think a lot of times it's like they're just laying the foundation for what may happen in trades and whatnot leading up to the winter meetings, which generally you do get some bigger announcements, bigger moves made when the winter meetings are going on. But as you mentioned, that's probably not going to happen. But I guess it's good for sound bites because it really feels like Jed Hoyer's coming out with his sound bites. Talking about how nimble. That's the word of the day.
Yeah. Nimble. He said it like 5 times in the space of 3 sentences. Which is a little. I mean, that's in. Again, this is. I know I have my own little verbal tics or whatever, right? So real running the same thing. But after we heard Carter Hawkins talk about processes about 50 times. Now I've heard Hoyer say nimble, but it is kind of interesting just the communication aspect of the front office. It's a little bit different from when Theo Epstein was there, although I feel like Hoyer has actually been really transparent. It was interesting to hear kind of some of his thoughts there, although some people take what he said and they'll look at some of the things and say, well, this sounds like he's saying we're not going to do a long-term deal. And I'm like, I don't know, man. It sounds to me like they're just hedging their bets and saying, yeah, there are some pitfalls there. And if we were to do it, it would have to work out really, really well. And there's all these different things to consider. I mean, he's being, I don't think he's being veiled. But he's also not saying a whole lot. But it
has a very political feel to it, right? It's like like very politician-like, where you say a whole bunch of words, but they don't mean anything.
Yeah, the only thing, I do think, and part of this is because we have the context for the Wade Miley deal already, right? That they picked him up, and Hoyer talked about being able to pounce if things come up. We've heard him talk about, again, spending intelligently, and I do think that the possibility is there that we're going to see, not even if we don't see like a really big move. I do think one of the things that's been discussed here that I've written about a couple of times is maybe going out there and trying to take advantage of a team like the Padres, looking to offload a couple of big salaries from guys that aren't really part of the future, be it Will Myers or somebody like that. Speaking
of the Padres, there was word that came out, I don't know, yesterday or something like that about the trade deadline conversations that were going on that involved Anthony Rizzo. It seemed so off base of what we had talked about, the concept of just getting, offloading some of the cash and then getting, some prospects.
Well, but I think it fits exactly though, because, the Padres felt like they maybe would have upgraded with Rizzo to make their little run. The Cubs would have picked up Hosmer, which is one of the targets we've talked about, and a prospect. So,
but consider what they got, right? They would have picked up Hosmer though, and they would have. I mean, I guess if the Padres are picking up some of his salary, then maybe that trade makes sense. It just doesn't. When you look at what
the Cubs are taking on the money to buy the prospect.
Yeah, so let's look at what the Cubs got for Rizzo from the Yankees, right? They got a couple prospects. They didn't have to really take on any money.
Yeah, well, I think that's why they didn't do the deal with San Diego, right? It's because they had a couple things in place, and it's like, well, we could do this, or hey, over here we can get a couple guys, and we don't have to, we don't have to pay anything. Well, they paid down Rizzo's salary, but that was
to
to
me,
get prospects. So
to me, it seemed more like a deal that it'd be like the Padres would just send Hosmer to the Cubs along with some prospects, and to me, that's like you're just taking money off their books. You're getting some prospects, and maybe you send a guy or two back. I mean, I don't know. Anthony Rizzo just seemed like when I saw his name in that, that's conceptually doesn't feel like what I was thinking about would happen. If the Cubs were to trade with the Padres in that type of situation, they wouldn't give up a guy that was like a major league kind of talent guy.
I definitely assumed they would, because they wanted to get rid of Rizzo anyway. I mean, they were going to move him. So in that case, you move your first baseman, you get back a first baseman, right? This is before Frank Schwindel emerged, because that happened the day of the deadline when he came up, because Rizzo went the day before. So, I mean, to me, that was kind of the whole deal, is you'd swap. It doesn't make quite as much sense now, because if you were to do it now, if you assume, right, let's figure Schwindel's actually going to continue, not nearly what, but to be a serviceable everyday first baseman, and then you could kind of have a platoon with like you would be overpaying for what Hosmer would provide, because he's just not been a super productive hitter. But if you were to get back a prospect or two in return, and that's where I think I talked about on here maybe a couple of weeks ago, and this is one of those where Hoyer made it pretty clear, and I mean it's pretty obvious overall that the Cubs don't want to sign someone who's gotten a qualifying offer. However, if they were able to figure something out to where, hey, if you can go in and quote unquote buy a couple of prospects with this deal, then hey, if you look at having a guy who you grade out as a second round quality player, right? Let's say that, and then you get another guy who squares up with a $500,000 international free agent bonus type player, and you pick a couple of those guys up, then it makes it easier to stomach the losses from a qualifying offer, because you've now mitigated exactly what you would have lost there. So I think that when he's talking about being nimble, again, that's where the calculus comes in. It's not a matter of just like, we don't want to lose these players from a qualifying offer penalty, because of course they don't. However, if you can make other moves that offset that specifically, then it makes a little bit more sense. So we'll see.
Well, and there was word, I think yesterday, about the possibility of the Cubs signing Corey Seager, that came out that they were a likely suitor for Seager, one of, I think, 4 or 5 teams. Like, is that really realistic? Or is this just, we get in this phase right now where we're in, it's just a speculation, just people just throw stuff out. And so do you think that's real, or do you think that's just somebody just kind of throwing something out because they need to write about something? Not you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wrote about it because someone else wrote about it, but I had written about, but we've heard that they're interested in or they've done some research, but I still think there's a measure of this, like, those who have maybe been around. Mauricio Rubio was a former, I don't know if he wrote for like Baseball Prospectus. I think it was BP. I don't think it was Fangraphs. And he eventually got hired, and I can't remember, was it the White Sox? Somebody hired him as, into their scouting department, and he's been off Twitter ever since. And so we're talking like 5 or 6 years ago. But he had a kind of now it's apocryphal, because I don't even know if it still exists out there, but he had this tweet that was like a dude kicking back, smoking a cigar, and it was like, but who is interested in my client? And it was, it was like the Cubs and Yankees and Red Sox. So, I mean, I think it's one of those things where it's like, it's very easy for a player's reps, especially a player who's going to be highly coveted and could command $300 million. They want to tout as many big market teams as possible.
Sure.
Right. They want to absolutely have the Cubs in on people, because the Cubs have money. The Cubs need a shortstop, or they should. I mean, unless you really want to stand Nico Horner, which I'm not going to do. I think Nico is a perfectly fine baseball player. But listen, if you're talking just on paper, you give me Corey Seager versus Nico Horner, and it's like I'm taking Seager every day of the week and twice on Sunday. And they've got enough money to make it work. And Seager, and then if we could even throw Carlos Correa in there too, he'll probably even earn more money. But both of them have really strong hit tools. right? We're not talking 50 home runs, but Seager doesn't strike out very much at all, right? I mean, he would be right up there with the top 2 or 3 Cubs over the last several years in terms of his strikeout rate, and Carlos Correa is not too far behind.
That's not saying much, though.
It's not, but I'm talking about like 16, 17%. So like Anthony Rizzo, Ben Zobrist, kind of, a high contact hitter relative to where the thing with Seager is there's been a couple of times when he's hit over 40 doubles, 40 or more, which is kind of reminiscent of Nick Castellanos. And when he came over saying, hey, this guy's got a ton of doubles power, boy, Wrigley is really favorable in the alleys. Some of those can kind of maybe go out a little bit. So there's a lot there. But again, you're talking about a really massive commitment when you're saying 9 to 10 years at something approaching $300 million. And
that's not happening.
No, I really don't think. I don't
think any team's going to go there.
I don't know, man.
Listen, Seager's good, but he's not. To me, Seager's kind of like a Chris Bryant. He's not flashy. He's solid, good player, all around good player. Gonna help you win a bunch of games. But he's not like the Javier Baez flashy type kind of appeal. You can't really market around him.
Well, yeah, and I think that's part of it. Although that might be part of maybe the Cubs are kind of banking on that. I know the thing with Seager too is he's probably gonna have to move off short at some point, but the Cubs have a bunch of shortstops coming up. Yeah. So they could. I mean, what I try to do when I broke that all down was say, hey, listen, it's very unlikely they're going to spend this money, but there are reasons ABC XYZ that it really does make a lot of sense. Just if you strip out some of the money aspects and you think, well, even if you put those in there, if this all like they could, I mean, $30 million is a lot of money for one player, but does anybody, and even for the Cubs right now, they've got a lot that's available there. And then you've got Jason Hayward falling off in a couple years. You have some of these, there's not a lot of those commitments. So it's a very different situation. I think one way or the other, though, even if we step back from that, like they absolutely have to go get someone, whether that's trading with the A's for Matt Olson or going out. They have not. I keep bringing this up because it keeps being true and it keeps melting my brain every time. They haven't signed a position player for more than 2 years since Hayward. They haven't signed a position player for more than $8 million since Hayward. Like, that is unconscionably bad, and it can't continue when you've lost as many players. They've got to go get someone. It doesn't have to be somebody for $300 million.
It's like somebody needs to remind them that they actually run a Major League Baseball team that requires players to
you
be
can't
successful.
Just go get Daniel Descalso and Steven Souza Jr. and expect that those guys are magically going to fix what's wrong with that offense, especially when they don't really fit the profile. I mean, Descalso, like, if he had managed to have another career best year, it might have been, but he was awful. I mean, he was a terrible player for them. And they also made him play through injuries, which was just I could go back on it because I wrote about that a couple times. Like, look, you can look at his before and after from the ankle injury and see what happened. It's just but they've just gotten by on like, oh, well, man, it's really, think about this. How I could draw a direct parallel between continuing to go out and sign these low dollar, often minor league deals. Jason Kipnis, Miles in the comments brings up minor league deals or very, very minimal contracts to veteran position players with the hopes. And it's worked out as like, okay, it worked out with Matt Duffy, right? Like rarely does it work out well. And in the same, but they keep doing it just in the same way.
Yeah, but it's like,
but they kept saying
worked with Matt Duffy, but it didn't. That wasn't the thing that got them over the edge to get to the World Series. You know what I'm saying?
But I'm just saying, in general, the practice of going out and picking these guys up off the scrap heap generally works out very, very poorly. And at least Duffy was a good player, right? But then it's the same thing. It's the same mentality of like, oh, well, we expect these hitters to mature in a certain way, and that we've hoped that every single fucking year since 2016. And, at a certain point, you've got to just be like, it's probably not a good idea. You can wish in one hand, you can shit in the other one, and let's see which one fills up quicker. And Theo Epstein has to go wash his hands, or he had to after 5 years of that. And he did. He washed his hands of the whole thing, and he turned it over to Jed Hoyer with a year left on his deal. So it's a funny way that comes. So you got to invest. I'm pretty sure there's going to be somebody out there that wants less than 10 years and $300 million and is a pretty good baseball player. And so
You would think.
they need to find a few of those guys, actually. They could really use them.
Yeah. Just a few of them. So were you surprised by any of the qualifying offers that went out? I mean, I guess the biggest surprise for me maybe was Noah Syndergaard, but I don't know. Was there any player that received a QO that you were like, did not expect to see?
Raisel Iglesias, I think that was a little bit surprising to me for a reliever to make that kind of money, or to get that kind of a deal. I was surprised John Gray didn't get one.
Yeah.
Steven Matz didn't get one. I was a little bit surprised there. The Verlander thing is a little bit weird. And I'm not necessarily surprised by it. Although, and I wonder how much, the Astros are maybe trying to force his hand because and with a lot of these dudes, right? With a lot of them, I'm sitting there going, Carlos Rodon not getting one was also kind of a surprise. I know a lot of people talk about the White Sox financial issue, but it's like, okay, great, but you've got to replace that production that he put up for an equivalent amount of money, and that's not easy to do for a pitcher who pitched as well as he did. But I look at some of these guys, I'm like, is a team going to give or actually, here's another one, Michael Conforto. Big surprise to me that they gave him one because he was not very good at all last year. And then to me, the added surprise was that he's going to turn it down or already has turned it down.
Yeah.
I'm like,
yeah, he turned it down right away.
Who's going to give you more money than that on top of the penalty? Like you're not going to get $18.4 million annually. I would be shocked if he made that. Maybe not shocked, but I'd be pretty surprised if he got that on 2 years, let alone the penalties that somebody's going to have to pay. Like he's a dude who I could see being a very, very late signing for a lot less money than he wants, if he doesn't even have to wait all the way till June for that thing to expire, depending on, again, unless they change those retroactively, but I don't think they will. That was really odd. So he must have really wanted to get the hell out of New York because I'm like, dude, he was a guy in Syndergaard again. He's another one. If he's healthy, it makes a lot of sense, right? For him, he could, if I'm him, I'm taking that deal, honestly, and doing like what Gossman did and what Marcus Stroman did with the Mets last year, which is to parlay that into, hope you're healthy and you have a big season, and then you can get a really big deal the following year. Because I just don't think with most of these guys, if you were hurt, he pitched in like what, 2 innings, 1 inning, 1 game, I know, because he was hurt all year. Is somebody going to take that risk? Same thing with Justin Verlander coming off Tommy John, right? The dude is 30.
Well, Verlander's a lot older too. Yeah, 39.
39 in February. Is any team going to, first of all, how many teams are going to offer him multiple years at 39 years old for a combination between the whole, for an aggregate of more than 18.4 million in addition to the penalty? It's really weird that these guys are all turning and Verlander's apparently going to turn it down, I think is the idea there. And the Cubs were not among the interested teams. Thank God, because I mean, I knew they wouldn't be. And I love Justin Verlander. I think he'd be great if you could pick him up for $5 million for 1 year, but he's sure as hell not going to, he's not going to a rebuilding team. Yeah, but I don't know who's going to pay that. So Conforto is the one overall. Just that situation is the one I'm like, and he's a Boris guy. So some people be like, well, Scott Boras wants all that money. I'm like, yeah, but somebody needs to be in his ear being like, dude, you're not getting that much money.
You may not be thinking properly.
That one was bizarre to me. So we'll see.
Yeah, so a lot of weird stuff going on there with the QO, and then I think the final date to either accept or reject is the 17th of November.
Yeah, they extended on the 7th. They got 10 days. So and that's where a lot of these guys, a lot of this is posturing too, right? They can talk about it and they get all this stuff. Well, I'm not gonna, and then you go out there and you kind of, because this is a nice time for people to gauge that interest, and I don't know how solid some of those things are, if they're going to turn this down or that down. And I wonder if, some of that is just a matter of like trying to get the team to pony up a little bit more. But it's become, we used to see like nobody ever accepted it. And especially under the old rules. Yep. And then even under these new ones for a while. And then they started to realize like, oh shit, man, nobody wants to give up a 2nd round pick and $500,000 to sign, kind of a middling player. and so, there's some of those guys who it maybe doesn't hurt as much. If you're already in for $300 million on Seager or Correa, a little bit of a different story, because you kind of understand that. And over the course of 8 to 10 years, you can make up for a second round pick. And if you're a team that is ready to spend that kind of money and you expect to go after a World Series next year, your pick is so low anyway, and it should be for the next couple of years. This is not nearly as big a loss. But if you're a team like the Cubs that's picking 7th, it's a much bigger deal. So the incremental value from, pick 7 to pick 27, that's really tremendous. Like, that's huge. And so that's another reason those penalties suck and they're stupid. But I don't know, man. It's kind of funny to me to see that. And I think somebody like, Nick Castellanos is going to be hurt by that. Right. I think that's going to, because he's, and he's a very, very good baseball player, but he's not a super young guy anymore. And his defense sucks. And so, you're kind of like, well, all right, he's a great bat, and that's where his value is. But again, I could see, again, he's probably going to, that's why I think the Cubs are out on that, because they're not going to give him a long enough deal that he's going to be around in 5 years and still playing really well in 5 years, that it makes sense for them to give that kind of stuff up on him. He's going to have to be like that missing piece for a team that says, you know what, it's worth that added amount. But I still think that's going to cost them. I mean, that's got to cost those guys in terms of the offers that they're getting by a few million dollars.
Sure.
Several million. And that's why a guy like again, John Gray, Steven Matz, like those dudes saw their value skyrocket, because if you look at the difference between someone like that, no qualifying offer attached, full-fledged free agent, versus, a similar type of a player who has that QO, and that's where I think like Robbie Ray is going to end up back with the Blue Jays, because he had this breakout season. He may be Cy Young, but who outside of the Jays is going to sign him and risk those penalties? Right, for the same, do you trust that's going to be there? Kevin Gossman is a guy that was super smart, because I was shocked. Honestly, I did not think the Giants were going to offer to pay him, because last year was $18.9 million. It's like, are you going to pay Gossman $18.9 million for a year? But they did, and he was super smart to take it, because there's no way in hell he was going to get that kind of money on the open market. And look what he did. Pitched really, really well. Now they can't slap an offer on him. Now he's a full free agent, and he's going to make a lot more money than he would have last year. So like that, and Stroman, same way. Stroman opted out of 2020, right? So to pay a dude that much money, like those guys played it perfectly. So whoever was in their ear, or if they decided that themselves, super, super smart. And I think that Michael Conforto might want to go talk to his old teammate and be like, hey, what went into your thinking on that? Because I'm not sure Boris knows what he's doing on this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting when you think about the status of the CBA and the fact that it's going to expire on December 1st. And so you're probably not going to see many deals get done within the next couple of weeks. And we're starting to finally hear reports, both sides were kind of like, trying to be as positive as they could be, I suppose, saying, oh, yeah, we're making progress, this and the other thing. But now John Heyman, who I don't necessarily trust 100% with his reporting, I don't think he's the most reliable, not the most unreliable, but not the most reliable. But he was saying that a management source stated that the negotiations were going as bad as I've ever seen it. And so, I mean, that doesn't surprise me. What surprises me is we're just now hearing that. Versus, it being something that had come up before November 10th or whenever. And so where you got the CBA negotiations, let's say that a lockout happens, and let's say that lockout continues through February. I mean, what does that increase the chances that some of these guys who reject the qualifying offer just don't get signed until the qualifying offer is no longer attached to them?
Yeah, because if and that's the other half of the Heyman thing was like the guy predicted we're in for 2.5 months of pain or whatever. I'm like, first of all, that's not like, to me, that's actually a pretty positive assessment, because that's saying, yeah, you're going to get it done in mid-February. That's actually not that bad. Then all you got to do is what? You back things up another week or so. Like, hey, get guys reporting immediately. You still have time to work. You've still got a month and a half from that point until the regular season starts. Like, okay, obviously it'd be better if they just had it done right away, but 2.5, I'm like, dude, that's not cutting into the regular season. Like, what is going on? But yeah, I mean, I think at that point, and that's kind of what we saw with Craig Kimbrell, right? Is that, and that there were a couple last year got a little bit better, although it was weird, after spring training started. But especially like with the remember Harper and Machado and those things just dragged and guys weren't signing until into spring training. I'm trying to remember, was it JD Martinez? Wouldn't his done like really, really late, like into spring training as well? His big deal with the Red Sox or whatever. But
yeah, I think so.
But you had more of that, and it felt like every year would be just delayed, like a de facto lockout, because everybody's just negotiating. They're waiting for the ice to break on those top contracts. And so nothing was happening until mid-February anyway. And, a lot of these guys like right up before report dates. So I do think, though, at that point, like if you've already kind of said there's no negotiations going on, there's nothing happening. Well, shit, dude, the game of chicken is starting real late now, and we've got some stuff in place, and we're going to have to go get these players. We're not going to give up these, they all got grandfathered. We're not going to give up these penalties. So sorry, and these guys have all had to work out on their own that whole time. I mean, the Cubs are pretty good about normally reporting early. They're not going to be able to do that. Neither will other teams, obviously.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think if that all shakes down, you almost have to, because now you're delayed. If team says, I mean, we could sign you now, or we could wait a few months, pick you up as basically a midseason acquisition, almost feels like a trade, and we don't pay those extra penalties, hell yeah. And guess what? If you do that, we'll pay you a few million extra dollars. I mean, I got to think some of those guys are sitting there with their agents thinking that same thing.
Can they negotiate that? Can they negotiate that type of deal like prior?
They could sit there and say, well, if you wait, because they're talking, they're negotiating with them. Like, okay, we can sign you right now. Here's what we'll offer you right now. If you wait until June 2nd, maybe it goes up. Now they could be lying, and then it comes June 2nd. They're like, sorry, dude. Yeah, we got, we got this rookie who came up and he's tearing the league on fire, or setting the league on fire. So, it's, but yeah, I mean, they could. And if I'm those players at that point, if you sat out that, you could maybe even make a better assessment of which teams, maybe at one team, maybe somebody gets hurt, and now they really need an outfielder, like the Braves with Acuna this past season, and maybe that drives the value up. So it may be one of those things and I don't think that's good for the game. I don't like that idea that we're going to start seeing that happen. And that's another thing about the QO that I think is stupid. But yeah, I mean, a work stoppage just throws a monkey wrench in everything.
Well, and let's be, I mean, if you're being real, and just based on what we know and what we saw, coming out of COVID, it took them 2.5 months just to negotiate that. And that's not the entire CBA. Okay. That was just to get back to work following COVID. It took a while for them to get there, and they missed games because of it. And it's unrealistic to think, I think at least, that anything is going to get done by mid-February. I don't see it. I see this going into April, May, even possibly even longer. And I mean, it's just the two sides. I think they're just so far apart on so many different things. And if that happens, then you get to a point where you can't negotiate with these players anyways.
Yeah.
Right. Until they have a CBA, you can't negotiate with them. So it's like the closer you get to that June 2nd deadline, the more of a no-brainer it is just to wait.
Oh yeah. And the problem with that though is, I mean, if you have 2 out of 3 seasons that are impacted, and I understand obviously the pandemic as a greater force, but the reason the season got started as late as it did is because of the impasse between, like, they could have gotten the season underway earlier, right? And that was the whole thing. Like, baseball had a chance to be the first ones back playing again.
Yeah.
And they were fighting over stuff, and they were not able to.
They were the last.
Yeah. And that, which is really pathetic in the grand scheme of things, right? That they couldn't figure that out. But that gives you an idea for the sort of disparity that exists between, between what both sides want. And I think, barring some sort of a miraculous deal, like, I am really concerned that they're going to lose time on the season, which is not something that the sport can really afford after a great, they played all the games this last year. They had fans in the ballparks everywhere. They had a lot of excitement from that versus, and a lot of the stuff shows like the attendance might be down a little bit. And that's, I think, to be expected. But a lot of it sounded like the TV ratings were pretty decent. A lot of things were going on. We had some excitement around those things. The anticipation is obviously that it will be full capacity everywhere this next season. You could have that. But if you shoot yourselves in the foot on this thing, and I know a lot of people want to kind of both sides of the whole deal, but the owners have a lot more at risk here. Now, the players do in a short term because they do have very finite careers, right, over which they make a lot less money than the owners will make. But at the same time, those players as an individual, like if I'm a baseball player and I've made $10 or $20 million, as long as I haven't, blown it all, like I can still have a very comfortable life for the rest of my life. But if you're a billionaire, things don't really work that way, because it's not like you could just be like, oh, I could just keep losing money on this thing and be fine. Like that is a bad news that's bad news for their investment, because that's what this is at the end of the day. It's their teams are just massive investments. And if you tank the value of your investment, or if you, materially poison that investment, it may not be over a year or two, but over time, things are going to get a lot worse there. And I just don't know that they can manage to keep losing ground after what happened in 2020, that they can afford to do that. And it makes me sad, but I do wonder how much the greed from the league and ownership is going to play a role in that. And I just sincerely hope that they figure some shit out and get it done a lot quicker.
It's just so hard to think that that's going to happen just based on what we've seen. I think it's going to get really, really ugly. I don't have a lot of faith in the owners, to be honest with you, or Tony Clark for that matter.
Well, yeah, the good thing is at least Clark isn't like their head negotiator anymore. He's the executive director, and I know he's the public face, but he's not necessarily the one going up, because that was the mistake, or part of the mistake they made the last time around, was kind of letting him set the, and as a former player, he definitely understands the needs and the wants of the players. But the problem is that they put so much of that, like they focus so much on those needs and wants, that they absolutely got hoodwinked by the owners when it came to some of those more again, the qualifying offer and the service time stuff that they didn't really care to focus on, in light of some other more mundane issues. And so it was just, it just did not work out well in their favor. And that's the problem, right? Is because once you've given that up, you've ceded ground, right? CED, not like to grow grass, to the owner. And now you want it back. Well, that's the part that's tough in a negotiation. If you've already given up ground, it's very difficult to go back. And now, hey guys, we screwed up 5 years ago. If it's cool, can we get that stuff back? And then we would like to actually move the needle further onto the other side past that.
It's kind of like buying a car, driving around for a couple of years, and then going back and saying, I know I didn't get the undercoating protection, but yeah, I want to get it now, and I want to get it for the price you offered it to me. It's just not going to happen.
I would like it at that. And I know I didn't get the extended warranty, but if you could go ahead and just put that on, I don't need it for the last couple of years. It's fine. I did nothing wrong, but I would like it to start now and to still be for 100,000 miles. So they're just going to laugh at you, it doesn't work. And it's like, or you'll have the owners come back and say, service time. Anybody becomes a free agent at 29 and a half. Hey, you'll all still get to get a new contract before you're 30. And that's just like the dumbest. Like this again, it's the owners will throw stuff out there. This is like when you're younger, and I don't know if anybody else had this, but like when I was like 5 or 6, right, maybe 7, and my brother was 2.5 years younger than me. My sister was she was 5 years younger than me, and you'd be like, hey, will you go do this? I'll be your best friend. And you could like con them into doing stuff just by saying, or you could trick them with stuff like, I'll give you a nickel to go do this. Oh, cool, because like they're 3 years old and nickel is cool. But the owners are like doing this, like they're just proposing the dumbest shit. and say, like, here you go. We'll give you service time 29 and a half. So for those of you know, and by the league year age, so that would be the cutoff. So it's like, July 1st or whatever is the date, the birth. So if you were going to turn 30 July 1st of that year, then, you would at 29, you'd become a free agent. Or if if your birthday fell after July 1st, you get it the next year. So, and again, it's like, first of all, 30 is like the worst age. Why would you want it there? And then second of all, and I think we mentioned this a couple weeks ago, if you had a guy like Juan Soto came up when he's 19, they're going to have 10 years of control over that guy. 10 years. Or a Fernando Tatis Jr. or a Vladdy. Like, that screws the young generation so bad. But then how many of these guys who have been playing are like, nah, fuck him, I already made free agency. Cool, we got rid of it. You can't manipulate service time anymore. But like, no, that would be awful. Like, I just remember looking at that and being like, who did you think was going to look at this and think this was a good idea? Who proposed
the owners?
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. But I'm like, but I think
and
that's
their high-priced lawyers.
Yeah, the thing though about like super rich people, right? Who do not understand, like, who don't live among normal people, and by and large maybe never did. Right? Like, how many quote unquote self-made billionaires are there really? Or were they like, self-made? No, your father was a billionaire, Tom Ricketts.
Are you talking about Tom Ricketts?
Yeah. And Joe told you all you had to go to college and go get your own jobs, which I'm sure had nothing to do with his connections. They totally made that all on their own. Totally made their own. And then after a few years there, then you can come and work for the family. Like, no, dude, none of you are qualified on your own merit. Right. And you grew up going to private schools and boarding schools and whatever, and you were always rich. So you don't know normal stuff. And you also think you're like Aaron Rodgers and you're the smartest person in the room, even when you're not, because everybody let you do whatever the hell you wanted. And so I really, truly believe they just think, ooh, this will be genius. I'll come up with it, because they don't understand how people on the other side actually conceptualize this. They just think, if I think it's a good idea, everyone probably thinks it's a good idea because I am the billionaire genius. Like, no, you're a fucking moron if you think anybody's going to think that's cool. So anyway.
And there we have it. Now you know why we call the show The Rant, people.
Yeah, I just get pissed off about rich people.
Because we just rant and rave and go. And that's a good thing to do. That's what we're here for. So the next date that maybe the last date that matters besides December 1st is going to be next Friday when obviously the 17th, I suppose, when players have to, accept or reject the QO, but the 19th, next Friday, is the deadline for 40-man rosters. And so once that's set, although the Rule 5 draft probably isn't going to take place, because when does that take place? December 9th? It's supposed
to be the 9th. So the Thursday of the winter meetings is when it would, the last day of the winter meetings is the Rule 5 draft. But I've got a sneaking suspicion that's not going to happen.
Yep. So we may have to pivot on the show. We'll figure it out. We'll see what kind of topics are up, but we'll definitely circle back next week for sure, as we get kind of some more information and more news kind of continues to swirl around. Hopefully we get some clarity. I doubt we will, but we'll see. And if not, we'll and if we go to this, there's a lockout, then we may just go back to interviewing people like we did, which is fun anyways.
We should go back. I think it would actually be kind of fun. I want to line up some of the guys that we talked to, like Scott Kobos. We talked to him right after he signed as an undrafted free agent. That dude went through all 4 levels of the minors and ended up at AAA and was super dominant. Max Bain, another guy we got to talk to, right, who shot, he didn't shoot through, but he was at South Bend, kind of up and down a little bit, learning a lot of things and developing some stuff. I mean, Dakota Mekas, another guy we had on. I'd actually be interested in talking with Zach Short, depending on what happens, because he's with Detroit. And they are supposed to be, and actually, you know what I need to do? I need to see if we can get Tucker Barnhart on, because he got traded out of Cincinnati. I don't know how upfront he'll be about his time there, but that's the team. Speaking of the Cubs being nimble and taking advantage of the Cincinnati Reds cutting money, but I think Barnhart being in Detroit, I like that because he's a local kid for me. Not a kid anymore, but anyway, I don't have to root against him because he's not with the Reds anymore. But anyway, and he's repped by some of the same guys, Alec Mills, who we've had on before. But I do think it'd be fun to specifically to revisit with some of those minor league guys who had not yet played any professional baseball, and now having gone through a season of it, to see like where are they at now, kind of what's different, what did they see that was different from expected, what went the way they thought it would. I think that'd be a lot of fun. So anyway, we'll see.
Definitely. So stay tuned for that stuff. Either way, we'll circle back next week. And until then, have yourselves a wonderful weekend.
Peace.
You too, Evan.